Now, I was going to make a long video on this to show graphics, etc. However, I decided that it is more important to get this message out there. In line with the series, What Do You Really Mean? I am going to cut the jargon and, for the lack of a better term, the bullshit. You see, I am a chartered accountant with a lot of other qualifications. So, if you want technical jargon, I can go there and mix it with the best, but I won't. So, let me tell you what this is all about. Did you know that the US debt is $36.9 trillion right now? Do you know that the interest that they pay on this debt is over $1 trillion? Now, if you want to understand the US debt in rand terms, then you will have to take 36.9 trillion and multiply it by about 18, which is the exchange rate, and what do you get? Close to 700 trillion rands. And do you know what the good news is? Apologies for being sarcastic. But the Americans have no plan whatsoever of paying down that debt. In fact, they have recommended a big, beautiful bill, as Trump calls it. It is a 1,000-page long document, and without boring you with the technicalities, the bill will increase the debt by $3 trillion, cutting taxes on rich billionaires and cutting medical aid and needs of the poor. So none of that affects us, right? Wrong. All of that affects us. You see, there is a saying that goes around, and it goes like this: when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. So, whatever job you are doing it, be it deeply entrenched in business or financial markets, or on the shop floors doing assembly, it affects you. You see, the debt is taken on by America. The money has been spent. Consider it like you are living in a family, and one of your family members, say your mom, has a bad spending habit, and her credit card debt is $36.9 trillion, and she plans to take on more debt. That would not be a happy family, and you cannot say that it doesn't affect you as a family member. You see, not paying down and bringing down that debt has a meaning. It is called kick the can down the road, which simply means, why should we pay for the debt? We live only once, so why should we sacrifice and not spend? Let's spend like crazy and leave it for the next generations to do the payments. So again, without boring you with details, when the debt becomes due, and about $7 trillion becomes due this year, then they have something called a bond auction, and they just roll the debt, meaning that it will become payable in the future. And then, when the future comes, it gets rolled again. So, Gen Zs, Gen Alphas, and Gen Betas, congratulations. This is the state of the world you will inherit. A very sad picture indeed. The saddest of which is the $1 trillion just in interest that gets paid, and which is projected to increase. So, who are the biggest holders of this debt? It is Japan with $1.1 trillion and China with about $800 billion. Both these countries have been reducing their holdings in US debt called US government bonds. So, why did Trump introduce tariffs on the whole world? Because Trump studied economics, and he thinks that he is the greatest economist in the world. But unfortunately, he is not. You see, normal economic theory says that when the stock market goes down, because people are uncertain about future cash flows from companies, which is called volatility, then people pull out their money and they put it into the bond market. It has been tried and tested. It is theory. It happens all the time. A higher bond market means lower yields and thus lower interest rates for Americans. However, on April 2nd, Liberation Day, when Trump announced his sweeping tariffs on the whole world, the stock market did indeed go down as people panicked and pulled their money out of the stock market. But the bond market did not do what it was supposed to do. Instead of going up, it went down, and it went down rapidly. So, where did the money go? It went into gold, because the gold price has increased dramatically to over $3,000. This was unprecedented because Trump wanted the bond market to go up, but it went down. So he was forced to walk back the tariffs for 90 days. Now, let's look at the $1.1 trillion debt which is held by Japan. The problem is the Japanese economy is facing serious problems. They are the holder of the most amount of dollar debt in the form of government bonds, but they are facing serious problems. The problem is that Japan has an aging population and is spending a lot of money on social security for its older people, and that number is forecast to increase. Japan has had a policy of keeping interest rates at zero and even negative because they wanted people to spend and invest in the economy rather than save. So for years, the Japanese interest rates have been at 0%. Now, you know that the market is always on the watch for any opportunities, and they quickly realized that they could borrow billions in Japan at 0% and then invest it elsewhere at a higher rate, resulting in a so-called risk-free profit. This is known as a carry trade, and trillions are tied up in this carry trade because for years it was easy money. Now, the Japanese finance minister recently warned that the economy is in a worse financial position than Greece, and we all know what happened to Greece. You see, Japan's debt to GDP ratio is about 260%. Trump placing tariffs on the electric vehicle market means that Japanese vehicle companies such as Toyota and Nissan will be hit hard because their vehicles become too expensive for Americans, so their exports will drop, and this affects Japanese GDP. So it seems very likely that Japan will go down as Greece did. But Japan holds a nuclear economic bomb, and it is said that if it goes down, it will not go down alone. For one, the Bank of Japan is increasing interest rates after keeping it at zero and negative for a number of years. This is now causing people to scramble for the exit to unwind their carry trades, which is no longer easy money if you have to pay for that money that you borrowed from Japan or in Japan. Secondly, Japan holds the $1.1 trillion of US Treasury bonds which it can sell at any time. If that happens, then Japan can flood the market with US bonds, which will then bring the bond price down and force interest rates in the US up. Thus, US consumers will pay higher interest rates for their homes, cards, credit cards, etc., all debt. Japan has silently been offloading some of its bond holdings, as has China, and the markets are not unaware. So again, how does this affect us? Because after World War II, the world came together and decided that the reserve country of the world would be the US dollar. The dollar was and is the currency the world relies on and that the world trades with. The US dollar bonds were regarded as risk-free and were afforded AAA ratings by rating agencies such as Moody's, Fitch, and S&P Global Ratings. The safest investment that you could ever make was in US Treasury bonds. But then, things started to happen. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the Russian dollar assets were frozen, meaning that Russia did not have access to their own money. Other countries then started worrying. If they can do this to Russia, then they can do this to us as well. And now, Trump's tariffs are creating uncertainty, meaning that he was saying that he ruled the country and the world. Believe it or not, but due to the reliance on the US dollar, he effectively does rule the world. And if he can willy-nilly control the value of the dollar, then he effectively has the power to bring any country to its knees. You see, if Trump is on a mission to bring the dollar down in value, which seems to be his intention, because according to him, a strong dollar means that US companies are finding it harder to sell their goods to other countries. So, Trump wants to increase the ability of American companies to sell, and he wants to make American companies such as Apple bring back their factories to America. However, Trump has not considered that it takes years for factories to be built, and it takes skilled workers in China to make things like an iPhone. He has not considered that Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, has said that if an iPhone is made in America, it will be 3 times more expensive. He has not considered that Tim Cook has said that if they were to have a meeting of software engineers in America, they could fill the room. But if you had that same meeting in China, they would need a football stadium. The other thing that has happened is that Moody's recently downgraded the US from AAA to AA1, meaning that it is not as risk-free as before. This is a massive step. And talk about keeping it simple. All the markets want to know is what letters are you? An A, AAA, B, C? So if you look at Trump, he may think that he is so clever, but with respect, he's not at all. One can see right through him. All he wants to do is to weaken the US dollar. And he does this by creating uncertainty, imposing tariffs, and creating panic. For example, he recently announced, and I'm quoting, that 90 countries were coming to the White House to kiss his ass, unquote. However, only one trade deal with the UK, which lacks substance or detail, was announced. And then recently, he announced that the talks with the UK were going nowhere and that he was imposing a 50% tariff on them. The markets immediately repriced this news. And there are so many things happening all around us, such as gold surging because there's a flight to gold, the only physical asset that rarely counts. Basel III, which regulates capital to be held by banks, is now regarding gold as Tier 1 capital and not Tier 3. Basel III requires real, physical, tangible gold and not paper gold. Thus, there is a scramble for physical gold by central banks. And what is Basel III? Well, it all started after the 2008 financial crisis because banks failed because they did not have enough capital or reserves. Do you know that in 2008 we had a global financial crisis? The reason was that the American housing market, which was rated as AAA, which was sold off multiple times in terms of derivatives, which simply meant paper money. When they found out that the American housing market was not really AAA, the unwinding caused a global financial crisis. So now, we have a case where the American dollar, which we all thought was a AAA, is not really a AAA. So what do you think is going to happen? There's a lot to say, such as the American numbers at the end of March, the end of the first quarter, is looking extremely healthy. But companies and consumers were stockpiling in preparation for tariffs. Instead of investing in growth, companies were investing in stock, in warehouses, in building up their stock capacity. In reality, since April 2nd, Liberation Day, after the reporting of the first quarter, orders have been cancelled, and trade routes between China and America have run eerily quiet. But wait, US tariffs on China have dropped from 145% to 30%. However, 30% is still high, and shipping costs are going to increase as everybody is rushing to get stock in and out before the pause ends. Only one thing is certain. No matter what profession you are in business or even on the shop floor, you will be impacted. So let's look at how significant South Africa is. When Elon Musk was recently announced to be worth $400 billion, he was worth more than the GDP of the whole of South Africa, which is around $390 billion. I will be providing more information on future videos of what do you really mean. But for now, know that the world is in the middle of economic World War III. And when it is all said and done, the only question is, are you ready? If you found this interesting and would like further simple analysis like this, please let me know.